I'm Russ.
And I'm Danny.
And this is the Memory Makers Podcast.
The show focused on helping you create amazing customer experiences and make more memories.
Memory Makers Podcast.
It's a throwback to my old school, high school, XW wrestling, whatever group where I would take my show choir tux and do ringside announcements. Let's get ready to rumble action.
I love it. I was not expecting that, but that's fantastic.
Yeah, I love those guys with those big booming voices of just the
By way of Boulder, Colorado, it's Danny Gruening.
Like that's my energy just walking through the house.
You need to, what you need to do is hire a voiceover artist to record that for you, and whenever you walk in a room, just play it on your phone.
Yeah, that's what I need is more attention.
Hey everybody, Russ is here.
Hey, how we doing? Oh my goodness. How are you, brother?
I'm good, man. I'm really good.
Good. Anything fun and exciting that you've been up to recently? What's new in your world?
Yeah, over this past weekend, my wife and I and our dog went up into the mountains and did kind of an autumnal fall photo shoot.
Autumnal, okay, that's.
Yeah, I wanted to bust out the word autumnal because that's a fun one, and people don't say it very often.
Yeah, I would have mispronounced it had I not heard it recently from you of autumnal. So I like that, autumnal. Okay, that is a $3 word that I'm going to be cashing in, friend.
Let's go with $6 word.
I like it. Don't sell yourself short, baby. That's right.
Never sell yourself short. So
That's right.
That was a good time. Got some great photos of us as well as our dog, which was awesome. Nice.
Yeah. Well, and you guys are getting into that a little bit more than recreationally with your photo shoots and the whole bit. So I love your entrepreneurial spirit, bringing that stuff in, taking those hobbies and turning them into revenue streams is never a bad way to go. So I like it.
It works.
Right on, man. Well, hey, as we've been planning some of these episodes, we've had some good ideas from previous ones that we wanted to circle back to, and today is one of those. I think that one of the things that we've talked about in Amusement 360 sessions, as well as the podcasts, are new operators that are looking to go through a site selection process, or existing operators who are looking to expand and trying to go through the pains of finding that location all over again, that maybe it's been a minute. How do we start to have a high-level tactical checklist of good food for thought items to make sure that we don't make silly mistakes or have nasty surprises more than what would be the norm for going through that process? And so in today's episode, we're going to be talking about things like how to scope out the area, what are some of the what are good tools to use versus bad tools to use, what types of experts can you bring into the fold to make sure that that you're really not, having kind of hidden stumbling points and things throughout it, but also looking at, what's under the hood of the building, so to speak, things that we have to be aware of from a structural standpoint, as well as some landlord points to go through as well. So this is by no means a deep dive down each of those, but it serves as a really good framework that we've seen people be successful with of, okay, here's what I need to be cognizant of, and here are the people that I need to be bringing to the table to go further down the expertise route of that. And that way we can ensure that we're finding a location that doesn't, isn't a money pit from the old Tom Hanks, movie back in the 80s. How do we avoid or mitigate those opportunities as much as possible? So, Danny, why don't you start us off in talking a little bit of, when we're just trying to scope out an area, let alone the building, but we're targeting different geographic rings or zip codes, whatever it is, how do we start that process? Because it's always easier to start big and then narrow down in.
Sure. So when we think about kind of the area you want to be in, very often people use the term of a radius study of looking at maybe it's 3, 5, 7, 10 miles of a radius of a given kind of neighborhood or area, and what are the demographics of that, and how many people live in that ring, and all those kinds of things. But that misses out on the fact that no city is set up to be in a perfect circle of the way that people move throughout those cities and towns and the way that they perceive the area. And thinking about it more of an amoeba shaped study instead of a radial study. because when you get into an area, you start to understand, oh yeah, that may only be 2 miles away, but there's this psychological barrier that people who live there, well, we don't drive across that bridge, or we don't cross this river, or we never head to that part of town. It's just part of the way that people kind of move and clump and how they spend their time, because there's a lot of those perceived kind of barriers that happen in any given market. And so understanding that is really important, because in a radial study, there could be a whole set of the population that's included in that. But realistically, when you understand that, well, people aren't going to cross the bridge, it actually eliminates all of those people as potential guests. And it's not going to be 100% of them, but when we can use those kind of metrics, if most people don't do that, it helps us understand who's the real market that we can bring through the doors based upon what the look of that area is.
Yeah,
Now,
I think it's an important part of just dealing with reality on reality's terms. Like, you can have a feasibility study done and it's like, oh, there's 800,000 people within a 25-minute drive of my location that I'm potentially looking at. But if they're not actually doing that as rubber hits the road, then that's skewed, and it's just setting us up for failure from a very early jump point.
And when you start looking at some of the individual locations, you can use sites like LoopNet to understand what's available, whether it's going to be for sale or for lease, right? And when you start getting to those sites, number one, understand what is it zoned for? Because if it's not zoned for an entertainment venue, every municipality and city is going to do it slightly different in their terminology. But if it's zoned for something and you're going to have to get it rezoned, that takes a lot of time and effort, and that wait could be quite long. So that's a factor that you need to consider. And it's not just about looking at any of these things on paper and looking at a map and kind of doing an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet of all the different characteristics. It's also get in the car and drive there, because you're going to learn a couple different things. One, how hard or easy is it to get to that location from the main roads, the main thoroughfares, the highways, the interstates, whatever that is? How easy is it to get there? How easy is it to find? What is the general vibe of the area? Is there a lot of retail in that environment? Are there a lot of people coming and going, or is it more of a industrial warehouse type of area? Is there, overgrown lawns and weeds and parking lots, and is there graffiti? All these things are going to be important, because if that is the general vibe of the area, it's going to impact the way that families are going to want to travel or not want to travel to that particular location. And then while you're doing that drive, you may come across additional psychological barriers that maybe don't show up in a map, and understanding, oh, wow, in order to get there, I have to do this thing, but most people aren't going to do that. I got to cross this bridge or go over this section. And it's important to get kind of boots on the ground, so to speak, and be able to get yourself in that area to look around and understand what is in the area, what it feels like, and if there are other complementary type businesses in the area that will help bring a lot of traffic to that venue.
Big time. I think that it's never going to be perfect, right? Everything's going to have its pros and cons that come along with it. It's just looking at, okay, if I'm going after really high end, business, and corporate kinds of entities, it may make sense for me to be more off of the beaten path outside of a shopping center, because I'm closer to those business complexes. May just have a little bit of a different vibe of what my drive and approach looks like, where you're in the midst of a lot of Amazon warehouses or something else. But again, if your primary demographic is going after that corporate group instead of mixed age family groups and social time, like that's okay. And it really comes into, I don't know, you may find a place that's going to be, hey, it's run down and it's early in this kind of rebuild and recovery area, so we're going to get better rates because the landlords are more willing to put in tenant improvements and things like that, because they're trying to get all of that done. So you may see something that has a lot of future potential with it, know that that's going to be some upstart obstacles that you deal with on the front end, but more will come with it beyond, and you're getting some cost incentives and stuff to do it. So just know that there are trade-offs with both of those of where and how you can get some of that to offset each other. And once you're actually at the site, it's then looking at what's the age and condition of those buildings, because as most of us have been through, whether it's buying a house or leasing a house or any of those things, it's what who was the person that was in this space before? How well were they taking care of it? How often is the landlord having certain things serviced? And so it's really important to take a look at, do a MEPS survey, MEPS, for mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and structural. And so the mechanical is your HVAC and those kind of main systems. Like, is it in working condition? When was it last serviced? How much use was it? To your point, Danny, on the zoning, if this was zoned for something else, but we're using it in a very different way, do we need to have more returns? If we're adding something in like laser tag, do we have to add in a shunt to keep fog from getting spilled out into the rest of the space? What are some of those things going to look like? And is that something that I, as a tenant, am going to have to take on, or is that something that's up for the table for a tenant improvement negotiations with your landlord? And for electrical and plumbing, same things. What is the current working condition? When was it last serviced, and how much use has it had? And if your landlord can't provide, or your potential landlord and your real estate agent can't get those pieces of information, a simple inspection that you do may not get you all of that stuff. And so it may be a little bit of a red flag that you want to get a really good handle on, and then either have some protective language with your agreement of, hey, if this is discovered, then this is going to be subject to this person's responsibility. But so your mechanical, your electrical, if you may be putting in how many more electrical drops are we going to have to put in for our arcade alone? Do we have, is the circuit breaker big enough to handle everything that we need? What's that upgrade going to need to look like to handle everything that we're bringing into these walls? Plumbing is a huge one, not only just from, hey, this was a retail store, it was an old Toys R Us location, it only had 2 bathrooms in it, we're getting rezoned, we're going to have to add more bathrooms into it. What's the sprinkler system looking like? Are we going to have to sprinkle other areas more than what they have been? Our incoming line of water, is that big enough to handle those upgrades that we need to do? Like, those are some of the things of what's it made for now, what's its current condition, what do we need it to be, that really make a big difference. And we had a client, Bill Mann, who was leasing a building with sprinklers, was asked to get a pressure test, and found out he would need a much, much bigger water pipe coming in there to come up to code for the new zoning that he was going to have. And if that hadn't been found out early while he was still working with the landlord, that would have been $20,000 right there for him that he would have been, having to pay out of pocket. That was an unanticipated expense. And so it's just trying to be really nitpicky about stuff and poke holes in it from every angle that you can, so you can make sure that it's, okay, this is, we have a much better assumed risk of what this actually is. And lastly, when we talk about the structural piece, is it a big, nice open box with limited support columns? Is it a funky L shape or asymmetrical? Do you have 20 feet clear in height, from your HVAC and lighting fixtures and stuff down? If you don't, what's that going to do to limit the types of attractions that we can put in there? And is that okay for us? What's the flooring look like? Are you going to have to be doing a lot of refinishing? Or is there a bunch of demo that has to happen with walls? What are our windows and natural sight lines? Roof condition is a huge one as well. So it's just making sure that we're being really thoughtful about not just taking it at first blush of, yep, it's got HVAC and it's rated for this, that's all that you should need. It's how was this person driving this car before I got into it, and when's the next oil change, and have they been skipping appointments, kind of a thing.
One of the important things when you're looking at an individual building is to also understand the history of the tenants who have been in there. And I can't remember exactly who it was, but I know years ago we were talking to an operator who was looking at different locations, and they came across one. They're like, wow, this is perfect. It's got the space that I need. It's open. The deal is insane. It is so much less expensive than any other thing that I've seen. And someone had recommended, find out who was there before you, the several tenants before, because that seems strange. It seems odd. It doesn't line up. Well, he did that, and he got the history, and it turns out, well, there used to be a strip club in that building years ago. Little
different route that we may not want to be associated with.
Exactly, and even though that strip club's not there, there's a psychological barrier that's going to happen with all of the people in your community that knew that used to be a strip club, And if you're going to be putting in a family entertainment, it's just not going to jive. And that is something that was discovered early in the process that potentially saved the business, because had they opened there, no one was going to want to go into that space because of what it used to be and the association that they have with it. So when you start kind of getting into the details of the landlord, and you hit on some of the examples of what you can talk about in the MEPS, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and structural, but as you're going over the building itself and kind of in those negotiations, the very first thing that's important is you should have your own real estate broker. Don't just use the broker that is representing the owner of that building, because they have the owner's best interest at heart, not yours. And so having your own broker to bring to the table is super important. Have the right people. Make sure that the broker and the landlord get educated on your concept, and you can sell the idea and the vision of what you're trying to do, and kind of anticipate where their worries might be, right? If you have something that you want to add go-karts, their assumption may be, oh, I don't want you to add that because that's going to be really noisy and it's going to be super disruptive to neighboring tenants and all that stuff. But you can let them know, oh, no, actually, these are electric go-karts and they're not going to make that kind of noise, or they're not going to have the fumes, or they're not going to, whatever the case may be. Anticipate what you feel may be sticking points and be able to address them early on to alleviate any of those fears that they have. When it comes to lease terms, ask for a 5-year contract with the option to do 2 more 5-year options, right? So you get the shorter term lease, but then you get kind of a long-term future if you want to stay in that location. Gives you maximum flexibility on that space. Think about obtaining a broad exclusivity clause to prevent competitors from coming into that space, especially if this is going to be maybe in a shopping center where you're going to take over what used to be a retail environment, and that landlord runs the entire shopping center. You want to make sure that you've got the ability to protect yourself from competitors entering in that area that's going to make you struggle. Keep the scope of use as open as possible when it comes to your lease, because you may have a vision for what that business is right now, the kinds of attractions that you're going to have in that space when you open. But the family entertainment and location-based entertainment space is constantly evolving. 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now, there may be things that you want to add in that are not covered into that scope of use. So trying to keep that broad to make sure you're not going to run into a sticking point with that landlord because there's something that you want to add is not necessarily covered. And so those are a couple of things to think through. And as we kind of take a step back and look at this, as Russ had mentioned at the beginning, we weren't going to deep dive any of these areas. You want to make sure you've got experts on your side, whether that is a consultant who's helping you do a feasibility study, your real estate broker, all of these people that are going to be in your corner to help you out. These are good pieces that are food for thought as you walk down this path and start looking at these different locations. And this is applicable whether you are opening your very first location-based entertainment venue, or if you already operate one or more and you're opening an additional one. These are still applicable things to keep in mind as you walk down that path. So our goal with this was to give you some good nuggets and to give you a few steps to start that journey and things to look out for. And hopefully you're able to take some of that and be successful with it as you walk down this path.
Big time. Sharing is caring. So, it's don't make the same mistakes that others have made, or at least try to minimize those potential points of failure as much as you possibly can. So, Danny, I think that's an awesome place for us to wrap up on this one and allow people to take that a little bit further. We've still got awesome content continuing to come your guys' way with our weekly episodes, and be sure to come back again and check out additional episodes. Go back and watch some of the previous ones as well, and we'll continue to bring more and more tactical, strategical, philosophical things your way.
If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.
And don't forget those 5 stars, please and thank you.
If you've got ideas for future episodes, whether it's a topic or a guest, because we're going to start having guests very soon, follow us on social media, send us a DM.
And as always, big shout out to Mikey Mike on the 1s and 2s, running the ultra web for us. Appreciate you, good sir. And thank you all for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next one, troublemakers. Let's do it!
Unique New York.
The arsonist had oddly shaped feet. How now, brown cow?
That taken out of context in the blooper
It's
reel
weird.
Be weird. Don't piss off Mike. He's got stuff.
Yeah, no, Mike's had plenty of stuff that is the outtakes and the gag reel is Mike's like doomsday device for if I ever get too sassy with him.
Too sassafras. All right.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
I'm ready, baby. Let's do it.
Let's do it.